Excellent. Thanks very much. Well, welcome everyone to our Chiltern branch meeting. My name is Melissa Mark Joyce. I am the Chiltern branch chair. So this is a special branch meeting for two reasons. One of those reasons is it's actually a joint co-hosting session with the London Met branch. So one of the benefits we've had of this virtual world is that we have been able to join more virtually and connect, and I think that's a really good collaboration opportunity. So it was really great for London Met branch chair Renuka to agree with us to support this event and co-host it. So Fiona Annis is with us today. She's the vice chair of the branch. So I'll let her just say hello.
Good afternoon, everybody. Welcome to this joint meeting. It sounds really interesting, so I hope you all get a lot out of this and take it away. And it's great to be working with Melissa and the team at Chiltern branch.
Yes, thank you so much, Fiona. So good. So today's topic is an interesting one. It's titled Weird Science. Ooh, sorry. How does a safety expert protect our scientists and community from disease? Before I introduce Shurene, I just wanted to highlight the rest of the agenda. The second reason this is a special branch meeting is that around 2 o'clock, we'll be doing a special recognition moment for a couple of folks. So please stay on for that after the formal presentation. And then after that, we will do branch updates from both Chiltern and London Met, and then we will close. As always, we love to get participation. If people have questions or comments during the formal presentation, as well as afterwards, please drop us a line in the chat, and always, let us send us an email afterwards as well. So before I hand over to Shurene, I just wanted to say I'm personally excited to have Shurene presenting today. So Dr. Shurene Bishop Simon is actually a member of the Chiltern branch and a member of the Chiltern committee. She's our treasurer. So Shurene is well experienced, knowledgeable health and safety professional. And I'll let her share a bit more about her background. But the one thing I wanted to mention was that back in December, during our Christmas Webinar event, that's when we learned even further about Shurene's skill set, in that she is a very skilled singer. So thought that was a really good presentation Shurene had shared with us in terms of her skill set. She serenaded us during our Christmas event. So thanks again, Shurene, for offering to speak at this session. And thanks again for everyone who helped coordinate and prepare it. So I'll hand over to you now, Shurene.
Thank you for that, Melissa. That was unexpected about the singing, but yes, in my spare time, I do like to sing classically. If somebody could acknowledge that they're seeing the flyer for the great. Well, okay. Well, thanks, Melissa. Thank you to Chiltern branch and to the London Met branch for inviting me to speak today. So the title of the talk is Weird Science, and I'm hoping that you will gain some very useful insight into how laboratory research staff and the community around them are protected against infectious risks. So I'm going to be talking for about 35 to 40 minutes, and then I will turn over to you to ask questions. If we run out of time to answer all the questions, then please do feel free to send me an email. My contact details will be on the last slide. So there's a lot to cover, so I'm gonna jump right in. So on my first slide here, I have a picture of a so-called weird scientist. And this is just to speak to the stereotype that has been around for quite a long time, that scientists are usually, but not always, men with gray, untamed hair, and that they'd be busy in the lab, buzzing around, working on something that was gonna lead to some catastrophic and explosive event. Well, because of the brilliant work that our scientists have done in discovering a vaccine so quickly, I'm pleased to say that we're moving further and further away from that stereotype, as a lot of younger persons and diverse peoples as well have been enrolling on scientific degrees. So I'm going to introduce myself. So this is a picture of me taken in the lab when I used to do laboratory research myself. And my role was to clone human genes into bacterial systems and manipulate those organisms so that they would produce the human proteins. And then I would purify those proteins and try to detect or to find out what the structure of the protein is like. And the reason why that piece of work is so crucial is because these proteins were very much indicative of certain human diseases. So that's what I used to do in the lab. And I did that at the University of Oxford, at the Institute of Cancer Research, and at Public Health England. So because of my expertise in the lab, and my knowledge of all things or most things biological, I was able to transfer that knowledge and that expertise within the biosafety profession and the general health and safety management profession as well. And I applied that skill set within the science sector. So my training started at the BBSRC, which is a UK research council. And then I held a biosafety and health and safety management role at the Medical Research Council. And currently I work in that capacity at Cancer Research UK. In addition to that, I also run my own biosafety and health and safety consultancy, where I specifically help organizations that are in the pharmaceutical sector, the biotech sector, medical devices. And so, yes, mostly those catering for the biological scientific sector. So if there's anybody on this in this meeting today that has any questions about how to make that transition into the biosafety field, then please do feel free to send me a message. As I said before, I'll be more than happy to help. Before I move on, I'd just like to say that a plus, but it's not exclusive, but a good plus will be if you've had experience of working in the lab. And a good qualification to work towards is what's called a biosafety level 1 practitioner qualification. So you can find out more at the end of this talk if you want to raise a question or contact me via email. So now I'm going to just jump right in. So what is biosafety? So biosafety, as you can see, is a biohazard sign, and wherever there is lab work that's going on that involves biohazard, you will see the sign on the lab doors, for example. So biosafety is about protecting the scientific research staff, particularly those in the lab, from lab-acquired infections, because they will be working on infectious material. It's also about protecting the community around them from accidental release, so neighborhoods, everybody in the community, schools, the high street, everybody within the vicinity of the research facility. It's about protecting the environment as well. And, for example, the wildlife. And because we do know that lab-acquired infections do happen and that they can happen, and we know that accidental release does happen, that's why the biosafety professional is very much valuable. And I'm going to give you some examples of incidents that have happened in the past. Oops. So here I have on the slide a clip from The Independent. If you can cast your mind back to 2007, then you'll remember the foot and mouth disease outbreak. And upon investigation, it was found that the source of the outbreak was from the Institute of Animal Health, and that's in Bright. And the cause was due to viruses leaking from unmaintained pipework. If you cast your mind further back, even further back to 2001, then you remember how devastating that was to, lots of businesses and livelihoods. Lots of animals had to be put down. If you can think of the supply chain, for example, there's a lot of uncertainty, or people who weren't very confident with the supply chain in terms of animal products. So it is something that if it does happen, it is something that is quite, it does have a large impact to not just the Institute itself in terms of their reputation, but to those around. My second example took place at the Animal and Plant Health Agency. So they have a contractor called Interserve, and Interserve's responsibility was to maintain the emergency power supply. The power that's being supplied is to very health and safety, biosafety, critical systems. And I'll go into that in a bit more detail in terms of the critical systems. But what happened was that the emergency generators failed, the site had a power outage, and so all the biosafety critical systems did not have their power supply. And because of this, it was a huge breach in the sense that the regulators fined them around £100,000. Fortunately, this incident took place on the weekend, so there were no scientists in the laboratory conducting research. But had it happened on a day when they were busy conducting research, it means that they would be at high risk of infection from the materials that they were working on. And it meant also that there could have been accidental release into the environment and affecting the community. So even though it happened on a weekend, the regulator took it as quite a serious event, hence the fine. On the left of my slide here is a clip from The Guardian, and I'm just going to read the title. It says, "Revealed 100 safety breaches at UK labs handling potentially deadly diseases." So this is just to show that the media always has a spotlight on laboratories. They're always interested in knowing what's happening, and they're always looking to catch organizations out, looking for, any sort of evidence of things not going quite to plan. And so, organizations are quite aware of that as well. And because of that, they do maintain the very high standards that's required of them. And on the right of the screen, which needs no real introduction, it's a clip from the Times about whether or not COVID had escaped from a Wuhan lab. And I'm not going to comment on that, but it's just there to say that rightfully so, the media and everybody is scrutinizing, trying to figure out, questioning whether that has happened, because, it has happened in the past where organisms do get released from the lab unintentionally. So now that we know, now that you have some examples of situations where release has happened, then the question is, what's in place to prevent that from happening? So the basis, the absolute fundamentals that organizations are aware of and will be working with the keeping an eye on is the approved list of biological agents. So in the UK, there's a committee, and you probably would have heard of them, especially during now, the Advisory Committee on Dangerous Pathogens. So they put together this list of organisms, microorganisms, that are capable of causing infection. And they've put the list together. And in this list, they have categorized each organism into a hazard group. So just to go through it very quickly, the hazard groups range from hazard group 1 to 4. Hazard group 1 organisms are unlikely to cause disease. Hazard group 2 organisms can cause disease. There is usually treatment available. Hazard group 3 organisms can cause severe human disease. There is usually treatment available. And hazard group 4 organisms can cause severe human disease. There is usually no treatment available. So there are 4 distinct groups into which these organisms are categorized. And so, as you can see, the lower the number, the lower the risk. The higher the number, for example, group 4, the higher the risk, because there's absolutely no treatment available should you acquire that infection. So I've given you this information. So what? For those of you on this meeting who are safety professionals, you will be aware of COSH. For those who aren't in the safety profession and you may not know, well, COSH stands for Control of Substances Hazardous to Health. And what COSH does is that COSH describes the facilities required to work with each hazard group. And the facilities are described as containment level facilities, and there are 4 different containment level facilities. So that's where we get a lot of our guidance from in terms of managing the risk. We get it from COSH. So what I want to do for you now is I want to tie this all together, because I've just given you 2 bits of information in terms of what you can get from COSH and the approved list. And I'm going to tie that together for you neatly with the next slide. So I'm doing that for you by giving you some popular examples that you can hopefully relate to. So the first organism here is the influenza virus, which causes the flu. And that is a hazard group 2 organism, which causes disease. However, treatment is available. Fantastic. If scientists want to work with this organism, it will be in a containment level 2 facility. Then there's the SARS-CoV-2, the reason why we're all sitting behind our screens and working from home these days. Well, that causes severe disease, as we know, spreads to the community, and there is treatment available, thanks to the brilliant work that scientists have done so quickly. So that's a hazard group 3 organism. And according to COSH, if scientists want to work with this organism, they must do that in a containment level 3 facility. And then there's the Ebola virus, which is a hazard group 4, causes severe disease, spreads to the community, and yet there is no treatment to this date. That work has to be done at containment level 4. So hopefully you can see that the lower the risk, the lower the containment level that's required, and the higher the risk the organism is, then the higher containment level is required to do that work. So what I'm going to do for you now is that I'm going to give you a little look into COSH, the exact place where you can find this information within the approved code of practice. So this is a table taken directly from the publication. If you go to Schedule 3, you will see this table. So if you can see my arrow, here you can see in the first column that the containment measures are numbered. And depending on the facility, there can be up to 14 containment measures. And then to the right of that is a description of the containment measure. So for example, I'm just going to read a little bit of this one. It says extract air to the workplace must be HEPA filtered. And that is required at containment level 3 and even more so at containment level 4. So that's just to describe the table so you can understand how to read the table. So if you'll notice, at containment level 2, not all the measures are required. So here, measure 1 is not required, measure 2 is not required, but it is required. Measure 3 is required, at containment level 2 and 3 as well. So this slide is basically showing you that there are 4 different containment measures, containment levels, and for each containment measure, the requirement is based on whether or not it's needed for that particular hazard group. So I've circled in red the containment measures that I'm going to be going through. So we just talked about, or I've just mentioned the requirement for HEPA filter. Then I'm going to talk about the requirement for disinfection and the requirement for the lab to be sealable, the requirement for negative air pressure, and hopefully as well, the requirement for a safety cabinet. So I've not read them all out because you can have a look in your own time, word for word, what these containment measures are. So I'm just going to quickly now take you through the containment measures. So I have designed an animation here for you to help you to relate to the containment measures more easily, because I appreciate that it could be a lot of words there in that table that I mentioned before that you may not grasp straight away. So this animation should help with that. So I'm just going to describe what you're looking at. So if you imagine that this is a room, so this is a lab basically. This blue line represents the walls of the lab. And here you've got door number 1, which leads to a lobby. And in the lobby is where the scientists will go in and they'll probably get ready for their work. So they'll get into their PPE that's required of them. And then they'll enter the main laboratory area through door number 2. They'll have some equipment in there. They'll have a workbench. They'll have a safety cabinet. In the top left, which you may not see when you're in the lab straight away, but there's a HEPA filter system that will filter the air as it leaves the lab. Outside of the lab, the air pressure is positive. So you can see it's 5 pascals, pascal being the unit used to measure pressure. And within the lobby, you can see it's -20. So it's a negative air pressure in the lab. So now let's run this animation. So I've opened the door and the arrows indicate the flow of air. As you can see, the air flowed into the lab. So in one direction, air doesn't flow out, air flows in only because it's negative air pressure. So it will move from positive to negative. And that's quite handy because it means that if there is any chance of microorganisms contained in the air, you call that aerosols, it means that they can't escape because they have all this air pushing them back in towards the lobby. So that's the purpose of having negative air pressure. Now I'm going to open door number 2. And when we open door number 2 in real life scenario, door number 1 will never open or should never open because it is an interlocking system. So I open door number 2, door number 1 stays closed, and the air only flows in one direction. Now we've got the scientists here working busily away in the lab, okay? We've got some working as well in this microbiology safety cabinet or working by it. And this is where most of the work should be done if the work is generating aerosols. So generating aerosols mean that the organisms are able to enter into the air that we breathe. And that's where the work must be done inside the safety cabinet. Let's think of an incident that potentially happened though. Let's say that they were moving samples from the safety cabinet here, but the samples weren't secured. Okay, the lid pops off, which shouldn't happen, but accidents do happen. The lid pops off, and then there is a spill. That is obviously an undesired event. because if a spill happens, it means that there are aerosols in the air. The scientists themselves can inhale those aerosols and become infected. There's a splash on the floor. It's going to be a major cleanup operation. So what KOSH says in that table that I showed you is that the air must be filtered. And you can see my HEPA filter there moving in the top left of the screen. So the HEPA filter will do its work in the event of that accident happening and have a look at what's going to happen to these organisms that's in the air. You can see that they go up into the HEPA filter and they get trapped onto the HEPA filter, which is exactly what we want to happen. And it means that clean air leaves the lab, not dirty air, which has got those contaminants which could affect the community. So I hope this animation is helping to describe, help you to understand those 2 points about negative air pressure, which are demonstrated here in the lobby, and the air needs to be filtered, which is on the top left of the screen. Another thing that's in the list, that table that I showed you before, is the requirement for sealability. So imagine that this spill has happened. Well, you know, now we're not just worried about the organisms that's in the air. We're also worried about the ones that are on the floor, the ones that got splashed into those little nooks and crannies. All that has to be clean. It's a mammoth task to physically get in and start scrubbing these areas. So KOSH requires that the room is sealable, which means that fumigation can occur. So what the scientists will do with the help of the biosafety professional is that they will do some remote fumigation. And one of the things that's regularly used, you may have heard of this particular compound, is formaldehyde, which has proven to be quite effective in decontaminating whole rooms. So that is a requirement of KOSH, and that's what would happen in this particular scenario. The next thing that was on that list that I want to talk about is the requirement for a safety cabinet. So on this slide, I have a picture of an LEV, and I've put that there because I felt as if most people could perhaps relate to an LEV which had a simple but yet a very effective design. So on this slide, you can see there's a welder, and through his work, toxic fumes will be generated from the welding process. And this LEV here, if he's working in the zone of safety, then those fumes will be extracted and pulled away from the welder, and he will be protected. Well, the safety cabinet required by KOSH has a similar logic to it. So here we have two scientists doing their work, and they are separated from their work by this glass screen. And this is an LEV in which they're doing their work. So there's segregation, and there is some airflow in here, which is keeping them protected. So now I'm going to go into that a little bit more. So there are 3 types of microbiology safety cabinets. So we've got class 1, class 2, and a class 3 cabinet. So if you can see my mouse hovering, that's great. If you can imagine the worker here, just as I showed you in the picture before, they're working away busily. Their samples are here inside the cabinet. So they put their hands through and they're busy doing their work, and their work is generating all these aerosols. So how are they protected? Well, they're protected because the air is being pulled past them into the cabinet, up into the top of the cabinet. Is being filtered, okay? And then that air that's been filtered is now clean, and it now leaves the cabinet through the ducting system. And it's a similar approach for the other cabinets as well, except that they have another layer of protection added on top. So this is a class 2 cabinet. Same thing, the scientist is here working, air is pulled in, it goes down into the bottom of the cabinet, goes up the back, is filtered, and then clean air leaves the cabinet. This one differs from the previous cabinet because you also have air being pushed downwards on the sample. So the sample is here. So any aerosols that's being generated, any infectious agents within the air, well, that's being pushed downwards. So it's just a slight difference with the airflow there. And then there's a class 3 cabinet, which offers the highest level of protection. And this is so because the scientists put their hands in through gloves. So the glove is connected to the sash, to the glass window. So they are not in direct contact with the sample. The glove is the barrier. And the airflow is through this area called the pass box, because they do need to get their samples in. So they open the pass box, they put their samples in, and this is the way the air flows through the pass box and up, and it's being filtered and it goes through the duct. So that is the safety cabinet that will be the different types of safety cabinets that can be found within the lab. Now I'm going to move on to talking about another requirement, another control measure as I showed you in that table that's in the Schedule 3 of IOSH. And that is the requirement for a specified disinfection procedure. So all the scientists will have created a protocol which tells them what they need to do in order to ensure that the liquid waste that they are generating is being disinfected properly, so that all the organisms, all the infectious agents are being killed. So I just want to say that there are several different products out there in the market. So what they will have to do is to be very careful to do a test. And this is usually required at the higher containment level and the higher hazard group organism. So they'll actually have to perform a little experiment to say, well, I'm applying disinfectant X to a certain amount of organisms, and how much effect that has had. So how much of a decrease it has caused in viable living organisms being present in the solution. And once they've confirmed that the disinfectant is effective, then they can proceed to use it. And they also have to establish contact time. So the contact time is basically, simplistically, is the amount of time required for the disinfectant to work. So that must be in place. And then, you know, a HSC regulator will go in and check on these things to ensure that they are in place. So I have a picture here, which I went into the lab myself, and I took these pictures for you. So there's a particular product on the market that it has a indicator, and the indicator is pink. And what that means is that the indicator tells you when the active ingredient is working. So the scientists will apply this particular disinfectant to their sample, and these are actually real samples here that were sitting on the bench. So you can see it's still pink. Now, should the indicator go off, then the color that you will see is a cloudy white solution. And I just filled a glass, a flask there with water, just for demonstration purpose. So if it did go white or a cloudy white, then they will know that, you know, this particular culture or liquid waste has not been disinfected. So therefore, I will not pour this down to the drain. So products like these with indicators are very useful in giving a visual of whether or not it is okay to dispose of particular samples that they have finished working on. My next slide is going to touch on waste management, because I am aware that this meeting invite went out to persons who may be a part of the environmental waste management group. So they might find this interesting as well. So here I have a picture of a pressure cooker. If anybody is present in this meeting, does any cooking with a pressure cooker, then you'll know that you put your ingredients in and you hope that at the end of it, it's all nice and succulent. So let's say you put a lamb shank in, then voila, you'll have something tender and juicy to enjoy after the hard labor of the pressure cooker, not necessarily your hard labor. So the pressure cooker has done a lot of the work. Well, similarly in the lab, there's another clever piece of equipment called an autoclave. And the principle is very similar. So here on the bottom left of the screen is a scientist putting some things in the autoclave. And the purpose of this is to ensure that whatever comes out is completely clean for example, disposal. So let's say that they want to dispose of some waste. So before I talked about liquid waste, here now you have the opportunity to also disinfect solid waste that they have created. So this solid waste goes into special bags called an autoclave bag. And the autoclave bag allows steam to penetrate the bag and enter the bag, because it is by getting the steam to the right temperature, that's where the magic happens, so-called magic of killing the infectious material, the infectious agent. So the autoclave has to go up to a particular temperature. It depends on what you're trying to deactivate or kill. It needs to go up to around 121 to 124 degrees Celsius. And that temperature must be maintained for a specific amount of time. So here I've got 15 minutes. Some organisms are a bit more robust and require higher temperatures than that. So for example, I don't want to get too technical here, but spores, if that makes sense to anybody, or certain proteins require higher heat in order to be destroyed. And so that it has to go up to a higher temperature and be maintained for 3 minutes. And to be completely sure that this process has been successful, autoclaves have been designed to produce a readout. So it actually will produce a report and tell the user what temperatures have been achieved and for what duration of time. And once that has been confirmed, by the way, that's one way of confirming. There are other ways of confirming whether or not it has worked. But once it has been confirmed that the cycle has been successfully completed, then that waste can be put into the waste stream that it's meant to go into, hence the picture of the bin there. So there you have it. I've touched on about 4 or 5 of those control measures as listed in Schedule 3 of IOSH. But that's not the only resource that the biosafety professional will rely on. There are other resources available. So here we've got, I've given you 2 other examples. So we've got one called the Management and Operation of Microbiological Containment Laboratories. And the other one, which is called the Management, Design and Operation of Microbiological Containment Laboratories. So these resources are very, very useful in ensuring that we keep people safe and the community safe as well. Now I'm going to go on to talking about something that's a bit more topical, and that's what's happening now during COVID. So scientists will be busy working away in the lab, and it's going to touch on what's being done ever so slightly. So the information on this slide has been taken from the .gov.uk website. So people in diagnostic labs are busily working away, trying to diagnose all the samples that we send to them to find out whether or not they're COVID positive tests or COVID negative tests. Well, if you recall from one of my earlier slides, SARS-CoV-2 is a hazard group 3 organism. So therefore, work, following that logic, you would think that work should be conducted at containment level 3. Well, even though the organism is in a higher hazard group, what has been allowed is for the work to be done at a lower containment. So containment level 2, not containment level 3. And you may say, well, why is that? I mean, this virus is very dangerous and, lots of people have lost their lives. Well, there's a logic to that. And the logic being, because the work that's being done in diagnostic labs, they're not doing work that's propagating the organism. So they're not generating lots and lots of volumes and viral counts of this organism. So because of that, the work is allowed to be done at a lower containment. However, research which involves propagation, because they're more doing exploratory work, they need to generate lots of the organism, then that work will be done at containment level 3, the higher containment level. Taken again from the .gov.uk website, I took some quotes from here because I thought people might want to know what infection rates or what's the likelihood of these scientists being infected themselves whilst they're working whilst they're conducting their research. So the government has been quite transparent, and they've said that to date, laboratory-acquired infection has not been reported for SARS-CoV-2. And then they move on to say, though, that laboratory-acquired infections with SARS-CoV, so that's a different variant, not variant, sorry, that's the wrong word, but a different type, have been reported previously, but not in labs but only in labs where there's propagation. So I hope that makes sense. So in terms of the diagnostic work that's been done, they haven't found any lab-acquired infections. And infection has only happened where there is propagation propagation work. So because lab-acquired infections do happen, accidental release can happen and has happened, as I've shown you before, then biosafety professionals are very much needed to ensure that those numbers remain low, that risks are being controlled. And so here on my next slide, I thought I would share with you some information that I took from the HSC website. In your own time, if you want to, then here's the information to the link. If you want to go and have a look yourself. But the HSC has been quite transparent, and they have published some statistics on the total suspected occupational COVID-19 reports made by employers. So from the period of 12 April 2020 to 15 May 2021, they have published data for that. And just so you know, there's data out for June. However, at such short notice, it was quite difficult to change the slides in time for this talk. So if you visit that page, you will see a link to an Excel spreadsheet. And then in that Excel spreadsheet, they'll show you a breakdown of all the industries. So I've just picked out the main ones, or the more important ones to show you this afternoon. So all the industries combined has seen around a 33,000 number of reports for infection, COVID-19 infection, which is occupational related. And skipping down to where it says other professional scientific activities, you can see that there have been 13 reports. Now compare that to, for example, health and social work activities, where there's 20,000 reports. You can see that the number of persons infected that work in the scientific field is remarkably, significantly lower than the highest report in the human health and social work activities, and overall in all industries. I've also given you this information in a bar chart below, so the bottom right of the screen. And as you can see, we can't even see the graph for the 13 individual reports in comparison to the numbers that have been reported of those persons who work in the human health sector. So I'm hoping that this slide provides you as attendees with confidence that the risks are being managed quite well within the scientific sector, that all the control measures that have been prescribed by IOSH and in the other publications are being effectively applied, and hence that's why people who are deliberately, or scientists who are deliberately working with them, have a very low rate of infection in comparison to other industries. So I am now going to conclude my talk on that note. I'm just going to say, well, yes, we do know that lab-acquired infections and accidental release does happen. It's been documented. I've shown you some examples of it. But though it does happen, we do abide by the very strict control measures as outlined by IOSH. And because we do that successfully, the scientists, as well as them partnering with us as biosafety professionals, because of that, then there are very few reported cases of lab-acquired infections. So my very first slide said weird science, as in posing a question. Well, is it so weird after all? And my answer to that is absolutely not. It's not weird, because what we do is logical, what we do is practical, and it's well thought out, and it makes sense. So we don't have the mad scientists running around creating catastrophic events that's gonna affect us all. There are measures in place that we do work to safeguard that. So before I end, just want to reference where some of my information comes from. So a lot of my graphics have been taken from Creative Commons, the HSC website, and the .gov.uk website. And I just want to end by thanking you all for listening so attentively. I can see that the numbers haven't dropped off, which is very pleasing to see, because usually you do get a drop off towards the end. So I really do thank everybody for staying so engaged. It really does mean a lot to the branches that have worked so hard to put this talk together for you. Please bear in mind that this is just a flavor of what happens, within the biosafety space. There's a lot more control measures, that I could take you through, but time is limited. If you have any further questions, after the session has ended, then you can always contact me through email, info@bishopsimon.co.uk. Feel free to connect with me on LinkedIn. Yes, I'll happily answer your questions after the session, but yes, let's take some now, I suppose.
Excellent. Thank you so much, Shurene. Very informative discussion, very informative inputs you've provided, and also timely as you touched on COVID. And I know we got a couple of questions and comments in the chat. Just before we get to the Q&A piece, I just wanted to recognize a couple of people we have in the audience with us. So Jimmy Quinn has joined us, president of IOSH, as well as Kieran, and our very own Louise is on, so members of the presidential team. I did mention at the start that this is a special branch meeting, so they will be getting involved in that aspect of the meeting after the Q&A. So welcome and thanks again for joining. So good. I want to hand over to Tim and Fiona to help facilitate about 10 minutes of Q&A. As I mentioned at the start as well, this was a joint session with London Met, so it'd be great to have both Fiona and Tim Fiona is from London Met, and Tim from Chiltern, to go through some of the questions that we got during your piece, Shurene. So Tim and Fiona.
Fiona?
Hi, everybody. There's quite a few questions coming up in our Zoom chat today. It's some really positive feedback there for you, Shurene, so you should be really pleased. So Jayant Kamat has asked, will the containment level be 3 for labs doing genome sequencing of COVID virus and not testing?
It will be very unlikely for that. Actually, I think they'll probably be working at containment level 2, because as I said, for genome sequencing, you don't need to propagate. You don't need to create lots and lots of big volumes. When I say big volumes, I'm talking, you know, even say, think of a liter as quite large. They're not doing that sort of work. So because they're not propagating, then they can work at the lower containment. So the work that they'll be doing, they'll be getting the sample, probably on a swab, for example, and they will be killing the organism and then extracting the DNA. So they won't be doing any propagation. So it's a low containment facility.
I hope that answers your question, Giant. Another one from me, which I've picked up, and then I'll pass to Tim. So Ritesh Kumar has said, how do we know, or any controls are in place to know whether the filters and the HEPA is working appropriately?
That's a very good question. So these filters have to be they have to be serviced regularly. So there'll be lots of standards. You may be aware of BS standards. So yes, they'll be serviced regularly, and that's the way to ensure that they are constantly working. And as well, these facilities will have a building management system which sort of connects to think of a building manager in an office. Okay, I'm trying to give you a visual. Think of a building manager in an office, and he's got to look at the negative pressure that I mentioned, ensure that system is working. He's got to look at whether or not the room is sealable. These things can be quite automated to give readouts, so he can see straight away when something has failed. There'll be alarms everywhere. There'll be alarms going off and people running around to sort things out. So a lot of these systems are on alarms, and as well as there are visual checks that are being done, as well as the regulator. By the way, the regulator does visit every containment level 3 facility. They all get checked. So they're on the rota, and they know that they are to expect the HSC to come in and scrutinize what they are doing.
Excellent. There's just a comment here which I thought was really interesting that Kieran Delaney has put in the chat to say that an instruction was issued yesterday in the area that I think that's the he lives in Ireland, and the instruction was issued to health staff to stop them wearing their scrubs when leaving hospitals to stop the spread in supermarkets, etc. I have to say I've often thought that when I've seen medical staff in their uniforms outside. So really interesting point there. Tim, do you have any questions for Shurene?
Yes, thanks, Fiona. Yeah, I've seen a few come in. So one question was, and I don't know if you want to answer this, Shurene, or not, but how can we be assured that the vaccines are safe? So, for example, many of the vaccines that have been rushed through, which have helped lots of people, have had side effects. Does it usually take longer? Are there usually more protocols and procedures to go through? And have they been kind of waived given the special circumstances from COVID? So the question is, how can we assure that the vaccines are safe?
I would love to answer that question, and I appreciate that question. And it's a question that so many people have, nationally, internationally. I must say though that that's a question for a clinician, and for that reason, I'm afraid it would be inappropriate of me to answer, because I'm not a clinician. I do have a PhD. It's in the biological research field. So I'm afraid that's not for me. Apologies.
No worries, no worries. It's a difficult question, which even a clinician might struggle to answer, I think, really. Another question I have, how can we counterattack or stop the myth related to COVID in that there's a lot of anti-vaxxers, I think this is where the question is coming from, saying that the virus was created to make money for pharma and things like this. As health and safety professionals, how can we ask or put the case to, for example, our employees or co-workers to suggest that they should take a vaccine? Or indeed, should we suggest that?
Should we suggest that? Well, so this is my opinion. Like I said, I'm not a clinician, so I'm not going to get into giving detailed answers, but I can speak about what happens in the lab. Okay, so let's say that scientists are working on whatever it is they're working from. They get their samples from patients' blood. Okay, so let's say the samples coming from a blood transfusion center or whatever it is. Well, blood can contain bloodborne viruses like hepatitis C, for example. So we tell our scientists that if we don't screen the patients and we don't know whether or not these patients that are donating samples to them, are free from hepatitis C, then we would like them to take the Hep C vaccine. Okay, so they have to be vaccinated so that they can be protected from the bloodborne viruses that may be present in the samples. And that will be the same thing, for example, for hospital staff, like surgeons, if they're performing, surgery, there's no guarantee that their patients don't have any bloodborne diseases, for example, Hep C. So they will have to take the hepatitis vaccine. Well, it's similar for if similar scenario for staff working with any infectious material where there is a treatment available. So I can imagine that once supplies are, quite abundant, then I can imagine that staff working on SARS-CoV-2 projects will certainly be offered the opportunity to take the vaccine to protect them whilst they're at work, because they are deliberately working with these organisms in the same way that staff working with samples that are donated in terms of blood samples have to take the hepatitis C vaccine. So the same logic applies. Yeah, I hope that answers the question. And I know it was quite lengthy, but I thought it would be practical to give an example of what's happening now and relate that to what could come.
Yeah, sure. For me, I think it's like PPE, really. Vaccination is like a form of PPE. You can give someone ear defenders or safety glasses, but it's up to them if they wear them. So vaccination is just a control measure, which is not that well quantified at the moment because it's had to happen so quickly. So yeah, I think each situation's got to be assessed on its own probability of risk. I think you answered this. What biosafety level is COVID-19 virus? I think containment level 3, but what biosafety level was the question?
So the organism is a hazard group 3 organism. So in my slide, I referred to the, you can't hardly see it. Yeah, it's the approved list of biological agents. So when it's updated, it will be a hazard group 3 organism.
Got you. Okay.
And for hazard group 3, you have to work at containment level 3.
So it's a direct correlation to the hazard level to the containment level.
It usually is. There are some exceptions. The ones that I gave you were clear cut, but there are some exceptions. In this case, yes.
Okay, brilliant. I have one question, if I may.
Yes.
Looking at the cost requirements for containment level 3 for SARS-CoV-2, it amazes me personally that there haven't been more measures put in place in enclosed spaces. Why are places of work and public spaces not anywhere near containment level 3, even though there's at times in different countries and different places, there's a relatively high probability of risk of contracting this? So why does COSH not apply to other situations? Because clearly it's protected laboratory staff using those control measures.
Yes.
with the 13 reported incidents via the HSE. So why are we not using more of those controls in public? Is it just money, or?
So you have to remember that these scientists, they're deliberately working with organisms. So they're deliberately producing higher volumes, higher numbers. So for that reason, it's a more strict requirement. Now, to take those measures and then apply them to ordinary office spaces, for example, that's quite a heavy investment, and cost a lot of money to run these safety units, with the negative air pressure and the HEPA filters and such. They are quite costly to maintain and run. Yes, so that would be very prohibitory to business to do that, especially because and very prohibitory, and I don't think it would be very practical and reasonable. In health and safety, we talk about reasonably practicable. Yeah. It would not be reasonably practicable because they're not deliberately working on the organism.
Cool. Well, that's all the questions that I have. Back over to you, Melissa. Thank you very much, Shurene. Great presentation.
Thank you.
Yeah, thanks very much, Tim and Fiona, for facilitating that part of the session. Again, thanks very much, Shurene, for your great presentation on topic. Good. As I mentioned, we have Jimmy Quinn on. I would like to bring him on as he has a couple of special announcements to make.
Thank you very much, Chair. Wonderful to be here. President-elect, members of the presidential team, Chair, members of the committee, branch members, colleagues. I'm here today, not correctly dressed, I may add, because I had to do this, I'm doing this presentation from work, so I'm on site at the moment. The reason why we're here today is to give an award to an outstanding volunteer and someone who has volunteered a lot of their time to the branch. And when we looked at this award, it was about the amount of work, knowledge, commitment, professionalism that they had that went above and beyond in pushing obstacles out of the way to protect others from harm. And when I looked at it and thought about what it is we're trying to do on our awards, be it a President's Distinguished Service Award or a President's Commendation Award, it was to reward those members and volunteers that give up their personal time and commitment and to recognise them. And so recognising this person for an award absolutely fitted that bill. Sadly, it's a posthumous award to your friend and colleague, Chris Bowles. Most of you will be aware that sadly Chris passed away in May and obviously is not with us today. And we all wanted to recognise and acknowledge the contribution made by Chris. And I'm absolutely honoured, humbled and proud to award Chris posthumously the President's Distinguished Service Award. It's awarded today in recognition of the impact Chris made not only at IOSH and the branch, but to supporting and protecting others whilst under the umbrella of OSH. To give Chris the justice he deserves for this award, I'd like to invite our good friend, colleague, and again, amazing volunteer, Alan Plom, who submitted this nomination alongside Melissa and Tony to say a few words. The nomination from my perspective, and I'm sure Louise's perspective, was heartfelt and spoke of all the amazing things that Chris did to support OSH. So Alan, if I can hand over you to say a few words, and then if you would like to go to Melissa and Tony, and then Louise, and Louise, if you could come back to me. Thank you all.
Well, thank you, Jimmy. It's an honour and a pleasure, and thank you for joining us. As you said, I hope everybody can hear me, by the way. That's good. As you said, I mean, Chris was a larger-than-life character. He was a big man in many ways. He was open, honest, and selfless, but not only gave a lot to the IOSH community, did so much more beyond that. And that's an inspiration to us all, for sure. I did give quite a lengthy tribute to Chris at our last meeting, so I'll not sort of go back over that. I spoke about Chris as an individual and all of the things he achieved, and that was recorded, so I would invite people to look back at that. But I would say that my wife and I, we were moved to tears when we listened to Chris's wife's personal eulogy that was read for her at her funeral. I said there were tears of laughter as well as sadness and recognition of all that he'd achieved. Zoe shared the text with me, and I'm happy to pass that on. It gives a much deeper insight into the man that we thought we knew. They'd been together since their university days and constantly by each other's side, working with St. John's and Red Cross and with disabled people in their swimming club and so on. And understandably, Zoe was invited today, but she just still doesn't feel strong enough emotionally to join us. On that note, I would just like Tony, if you're geared up for it, Tony, just to share a short video from an event that Chris put together with us and shows him in typical fashion wearing his heart on his sleeve.
One of the reasons we are here today is this is Chris May's memorial event. Chris May was a husband, a father. He was a health and safety manager at the Royal Veterinary College. He was our Chiltern branch secretary, and he was a friend and colleague. And sadly, he took his own life. And we thought as a committee, what can we do? Because we all felt, as many people do in those situations, shocked and helpless. And we thought, well, maybe in his memory we can arrange an event. We'll hopefully get other professionals thinking and talking about mental health and suicide so that other families and communities don't suffer what Chris suffered. One of the reasons I took to champion this is, as some of you know, I've had my own mental health problems and demons. I'm one of those people who's had those black moments, and probably the two most important questions I've ever been asked in my life, which saved my life, was, are you considering taking your own life, and what plans have you made? And there's quite a relief when you realise that someone is there to help you. So what we've all got to do is help each other talk about the issues of mental health, talk about issues of suicide, so that when people are at their darkest moment, there is a mate, a friend, a colleague who they can talk to. And we'll be talking about things like mental health first aid, where we train people to do that and then refer people on and signpost them for more specialist help, which people need. I was lucky. I had an excellent manager and a superb doctor. But other people, like Chris, are not so lucky. So we can come away from today and hopefully make sure that the tragedy doesn't continue. So I hope you enjoy your day, and I will hand you back to Louise. Thank you.
Glad we were able to share that with everybody. As we said, it was Chris at his best. And little did we think, just 3 years ago, we would now be commemorating Chris himself, another committee member. So it has affected us all deeply. But bringing us back to today, Chris was a lot of fun. And that's the ethos of our branch committee. I think many of you know that. And we're also committed to what we do. Everybody is in our profession. It's something that's notable, I think, when I meet colleagues, and we get so immersed in our work. And I've got to say, with perhaps more than with some good leadership from our vice president Louise, who realised and made us all recognise the fact that we need to just to step back sometimes and look at what we've all achieved together and as individuals, and particularly over the last year or so. I know that's what your awards are all about, Jimmy, as you said. So, you know, on behalf of Chris, I would like to thank you and the presidential team for recognising what we saw in Chris too. I was proud to have him call me his friend, as we all are. He improved the lives of countless people, and his was a life well lived. What more could any of us want from life? I would have asked for a minute's silence at this point, but in effect we've already had that. And Chris will be the first one to say, no, that's not a good good filming, good to look back on. So yeah, I'll just ask you to reflect on all the good memories that we've got of Chris, and to be inspired to think how, you know, each of us, how you can do more to help others. So thank you. I think it's been a lovely tribute, and thank you very much, Jimmy and the team. Thank you.
Thanks very much, Alan. Just for my part, as coming on the new Chiltern branch chair, I personally hadn't met Chris face to face, but heard very powerful stories from the rest of the committee members. And Chris did join us for our Christmas celebration and actually won the quiz prize that we had. So I would have loved to have met him in person, but from what I've heard, he really had a huge influence on Chiltern branch, in IOSH, and, you know, the health and safety community. So thank you, Alan, and Tony, and Louise for submitting the proposal, and thank you, Jimmy.
Thank you.
So Jimmy, I believe you have a second announcement.
Well, just while Jimmy comes back, just a note from me regarding Chris as well is that, yeah, he was certainly a larger than life character, and you knew that he was about, and, you know, we really did kind of, you know, he was excited as me at what we could do with the branch. So it was through him that we did lots of filming. The piece that you saw in the clip was from a phenomenal session that we put together as a Chiltern branch a few years ago at GSK in Stevenage. And he ran all of that, and it was hugely ambitious. And he was so proud of that day, and I'm so glad that he had that day. It was phenomenal, and it was, you know, it was a world-class session that we put on as a committee, and I think it brought us all close together as well. So yeah.
Apologies everyone. Sorry, Louise. Apologies everyone. My internet is going really bad, so yeah, I didn't mean to jump in there. Sorry, Louise.
Yeah. So but I think it's back to you, Jimmy, for your next announcement.
Okay, and thank you everyone who involved in that presentation, and thank you very much for your amazing words there, Alan Plum. You know, it's just the sort of person you are, and what a wordsmith, and one of our, dare I say it, because I'm close on the heels, elder statesman in health and safety. So wonderful to be here, and thank you very much for taking the time of you all. Okay, so we have another award today, and you know, I tried my hardest not to do this award. He was just always in my inbox. He's always on LinkedIn, and I am the president of IOSH. I'm the one that stays on LinkedIn. I'm the one that should be there all the time. But no, this volunteer is continually a thorn in my side and always trying to get in before me on LinkedIn. I'm joking, of course. And this volunteer is very new to the Chiltern Committee, and again, the nomination was supported by a plethora of fellow volunteers. And if nothing, this volunteer is spoken of very highly as a mentor and the support that they have given to several members, of which 8 have already progressed to charter status. They get themselves around a bit on PRI panels and participated in quite a few as well. Also, a No Time to Lose ambassador supporting IOSH's campaign to raise awareness. And I'm sure you've come across this volunteer and colleague an awful lot. An outstanding volunteer, talking about safety all the time, came off the tools and learned the right way about it. And again, unfortunately, a veteran, but a sky warrior, but a veteran none the same. So I'm very, very happy today to give the President's Commendation Award to Martin Jones. And as I said, he's recently joined the committee, and this nomination was proposed by none other than another outstanding statesperson in Wordsmith, Hugh Maxwell, supported by Craig Boorman, Chris Fulgoni, Kamran Hussain, Leon Maidment, Colin Campbell, and Mark Holroyd. And if there was ever the, what's the word I'm looking for, a standard that we'd look to in terms of awarding a President's Commendation Award, it's certainly to Martin Jones. Hugh, would you like to say a few words?
Good afternoon, Jimmy.
It's Martin. Hugh, would you like to say a few words, sir? Hugh?
I would love to, yes. Hello, Martin.
Yeah,
Hello, everybody.
you'll probably get a word in as soon as Martin Jones is given a platform, mate. So get it done quickly.
It's always worth listening to. I do apologise at my attire. My house is being demolished and rebuilt at the moment.
Good
Hi,
man.
Brenton. Martin. Hi,
you.
friends. Thank you so much for giving me the honour to do this. First and foremost, I'd like to thank James, the IOSH team, and supporting nominators for recognising Martin Jones for all his work for this prestigious award. Martin has and continues to support a great many of the IOSH community and even broader safety community with his experience mentoring and invaluable inputs. And also is a valuable member of the IOSH PRI panel and obviously this branch. It's always great for me to have support of fellow IOSH members and other professionals to help me assist others and support a wider community in their personal development and career progression. And I can only say that Martin is as highly supportive, energetic, motivated, and professional as anybody out there, and he gives so much to so many. So a big thank you for all your support, and I am genuinely really pleased to see Martin Jones receiving the President's Commendation Award. Martin, please keep making a positive difference. A big thank you on behalf of so many people for all you have done and all you continue to do. Thank you so much, everybody.
Thank you very much, Hugh, and a warm round of applause. Melissa, maybe come to you as chair, and then to Louise, President-elect, straight after, please. And then we'll allow Martin to have a quick chat. You there, Melissa? Chair? Okay, you then, Louise, would you like to say something?
Hello.
Hi, Melissa, would you like to say something?
Yeah, I'll let Louise, Louise, if you wanted to say anything. My internet is a bit wonky right now, so I can't be on video. But Louise, was there anything you were going to say?
Yeah, just to say, Martin, you are, I'm so pleased that you've joined us on, the Chiltern branch, and I'm sure that there's even more to come. Some of your repartee on LinkedIn has been phenomenal, and it's, we've all enjoyed it, and you raise everybody's spirits. And we know that sometimes it can get a bit heated on LinkedIn. I think one of the best posts that I've ever seen you respond to was one that myself and Bev, I think, were tagged into, where somebody was talking about their review that they'd experienced, and they'd tagged us in, and I think Martin had said, well, for a start, Louise and Bev weren't on the review panel, but if they were, how phenomenal would that be? And that was really great fun, and it completely, it kind of just brings things down to reality, and that we're all trying our best, and those kind of comments are so helpful. And I love also that you recognize everybody else that does all of this hard work. And I know that you've thanked and supported Sunita, who's actually here today and on the line. and recognise the hard work that she does in the background to herd us cats in the presidential team. So really delighted that you've joined this merry crew. I'm not around as much as I used to be, but I still kind of keep tabs on everybody, and can't wait to see where you go after this. So very many congratulations, Martin.
Thanks very much, Louise. You would have thought Louise was the ex-branch chair there, wouldn't you? Given all the thanks out.
I'm really trying to give it up.
Yeah, absolutely, and it's down to you, right? So that's the end of the meeting then. So go on in, Martin.
Do we want to hear from Martin?
Not
Jimmy?
really, but I suppose we have.
Jimmy, come on, let's hear from Martin, because his face was a picture.
Come on, Jones. Private Jones, hurry up.
Good afternoon, everyone. Can you hear me all right?
Unfortunately, yes, Martin.
Yeah, I'm actually on site as we speak, as you can probably tell from my entire, and I'm keeping an eye on two lads in my mirrors as I talk, and I'm absolutely sweating my gonads off here, as you could, I don't know if you can tell on your screen or not, but thanks a lot for everything you've done for me, Jimmy, Louise, the Chiltern branch. I've had quite a few family issues that I'm dealing with the last month, so that's why I've been a bit quiet and concentrating on looking after my parents spiral downhill, so I've prioritized family, friends and work colleagues that
Is it just me? We're losing Martin.
Yeah, I think we're Martin. I think we're losing you.
Hello.
I think we've lost.
Yeah.
Okay. One of the Chiltern branch chair, thank you very much for inviting me today, and obviously your ex-chair, the President-elect, Louise. So I'm going to head off now. I'll have another meeting. Have a wonderful day all.
Thanks, Jimmy.
Well
Thanks,
done.
everyone.
Bye.
We're still, thanks, Jimmy. So we just have one last part of the meeting. Oh, Martin is still talking. Are you all hearing me? Okay. So the challenges of technology, I'm facing it on my side as well. So assuming you all are hearing me, so just congratulations to Martin. And again, a person I haven't met face to face, but I have seen him a lot on LinkedIn, and we're very happy and excited to have him as part of the Chiltern branch. So I know we're running out of time, and we just wanted to highlight two key updates coming up with regards to branch activities. So assuming you are seeing my slide, so some great sessions have been held over the last year, and we want to continue with that remit. So in terms of our look ahead, we have in July and August several exciting events. On July 7th, we have the Future Leaders. So Philip Lancaster of the Future Leaders Committee will be sharing about the future leaders, their focus areas and benefits of the committee. We're also going to have a couple of our Chiltern branch members who are future leaders share their career stories. If anyone else is interested in who are future leaders, let us know if you're interested in sharing in that session. And then the other one I wanted to highlight is during July to August, we're going to have our summer school series. And so this is something new, and I have to say thanks to Alan for coordinating this. So, you know, summertime, some of us, if you're studious, would like to continue learning, and some of us who may have to do some remedial classes. So, but it's all good, because I think the intent of this is to bring together some key health and safety topics, leveraging off of previous webinar sessions that have been held. So these would be bite-sized 45-minute sessions focused on the 6-pack key risk areas. So you can see those there. One of the good things we're looking at as well for this is for it to be in collaboration with the Midlands and East region other branches. So it will be collaborated sessions, and we're having Status First branch will also be involved, and we're looking for others who would be interested in presenting on these topics or doing a live demo. So I'll leave it there for now, because we do have some other topics we'd like to cover later on in the year, as you can see there. I don't know if Fiona is still on, if she wanted to highlight anything with regards to London Met, but just from an IOSH Central perspective, tomorrow is the final COVID Unlock series. If you haven't registered for that, the link is there. We'll send this out. The last two were pretty informative, some great lessons. I know Louise facilitated one with Oil and Gas UK representative, talking about the lessons learned coming out from COVID. And of course, Jimmy and the presidential team have their Meet the Presidential Team sessions there. Seen a few of those posted on LinkedIn. Seems to be very good discussions. So if you're interested in attending, send Sunita an email. And in next few weeks, there should be comms coming out about vice president's nominations and council elections. So some key things coming up in the space for us to continue to be involved, volunteer, and help influence the profession. So I see Martin's back on, but I'll see if Fiona is on. If Fiona wanted to say anything, London Met. I can't see if she's on. She may have dropped off. Okay. Martin, anything you wanted to say? I know you lost the connection, which I totally relate with. I have poor internet right now.
You're right, Melissa. You've got me now.
Yeah, good. Anything else you wanted to say?
No, I was just in the process of saying thanks to everyone that has also supported me and recognised what I have done today, even though I am quite new on the IOSH and committee and other relevant events. So it's great to actually be recognised and appreciated for some of the input and time I'm devoting to helping others, because that's obviously what I'm all about, is obviously trying to inspire and influence others to progress and maybe tread the same path I've been on, or share information, which is what you guys feed down to me within the branch. And then I'm privileged enough to be able to feed that on to others, whether it's through peer reviews or general mentoring or whatever medium. So yeah, I appreciate all that you guys put into me, so that I am then able to share that onwards again. So I'm only a reflection of everything that people above me put into myself, like yourselves and Mr. Maxwell. Obviously, Jimmy Quinn, even though it's very reluctant when he actually does communicate. I don't know what his issue is. But yeah, dear old Jimmy, I know he's fighting my corner for me. So yeah, take my hat off to Jimmy and everyone else. And I know that I'm quite new on the scene, relatively speaking, but I'm trying to make a difference, one conversation at a time, maybe, Louise. But yeah, I appreciate everyone that's put time into me, and that has enabled me and inspired me to put time back wherever I can.
No, thanks, Martin. I think that's a great way to close out this this branch meeting. You know, everyone who's involved in IOSH, in the health and safety professional, are passionate about what they do and making a difference. And you represent that, and many others on this call represent that. Shurene presenting today, sharing on her knowledge, you know, everyone who's been posting on LinkedIn, etc. It makes it very exciting to be profession. So just want to say thanks very much, everyone. Sorry for my own internet connection issues, and have a great rest of the week and the month. And see you all at the next branch meeting.
Melissa, are you staying on for a little while actually or not?
We can stay on for a bit.
Okie dokie. I'll catch up with you in a sec then, maybe.
Okay, great. Good. Thanks very much, everyone. Keep well.
Bye. And I'll stay on for a chat as well.